Hello and welcome to the podcast. I gotta get some Java. I need a cup of Joe. I gotta get some of that smooth. This is all quite new territory to me. I only got into grown-up drinks about 4 years ago and I'm 48. Welcome to the podcast. Let's have some coffee. Jesse Hartman is a poet and musician at heart, but tries to make money through a hodgepodge of his intense curiosities for coffee and data science. Jesse co-founded the Coffee Podcast in 2015 as a means to sim-learn topics about coffee. I'm going to have to learn what sim-learn means. Anyway, in doing so, he discovered an invaluable lesson. He can learn about the world, history, culture, economics, science, etc. through the things he enjoys. His motto is often, "What's that?" which is to say he lives in a constant state of curiosity. Okay, sim-learning. What's that, Jesse?
I'm not going to lie. I totally made that up. So sim-learning.
Amazing.
Sim-learning, I think, is when you're able to learn at the same time as other people. And so I treat the podcast as a way for myself to learn, but also because I share that content, it becomes a way to learn with other people kind of at the same time. Sim-learn.
Like a class.
Yeah.
Ralph Ruler, who founded The Barn in Berlin in 2010, is known for his uncompromising quality approach. He focuses on high-quality single-origin coffees from personal farm relationships. The Barn runs a roastery, a global wholesale business and coffee subscription service, as well as 11 cafes in the German capital. Among them, there's the famous Café Kranzler. In October 2021, The Barn opened its first international location in Dubai. In June this year, they'll open in Palma de Mallorca in Spain, and with a team of more than 30 nationalities under one roof, the company is a true reflection of Berlin's multicultural lifestyle. Welcome, Ralph. That sounds awesome. I haven't been to Berlin and I'm dying to go. I feel like it's a great place for vegans. Is that right?
That's true. And if you wonder where your friends are, they probably all moved here. So they say it reminds people of New York of the 70s that I didn't live through, but
Nice.
you have a lot of creativity. Things used to be affordable. Now they become expensive.
Of course.
And yeah, it's very international, I would say. On my street, when I step outside, no one speaks German. And I think we only have 4 Germans in my company. I feel like a minority. Yeah.
Wow. Very groovy. George Howell, who was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Specialty Coffee Association of America in 1996 for having raised specialty coffee quality standards to a new level. He has grown his Massachusetts company, The Coffee Connection, into 24 company-owned stores, and he sold his high-quality popular coffee company to Starbucks in 1994. He's the founder of the precedent-setting Cup of Excellence program in 1999. It established the world's first international estate coffee competition and international internet auction that mightily contributed to breaking the commodity price cycle for craftsman farmers in the specialty coffee industry. Crikey, George!
Hi there.
Hi there. Between you, I feel like I'm among absolute coffee royalty. And I feel hideously underqualified. I'm going to let you in on a secret, right? I only got into coffee about 4 years ago because I'm a child, or I was. I guess now I'm almost a teenager, but I love it. And thank you all so much for being here. We've had so many questions in. Thanks so much. I'm going to start with Lee's question. He says, what are some hacks the experts have to make a good cup of coffee? What makes a great cup of coffee? Ralph, let's start with you.
Wow. Well, where should I start? Where should I end? But I feel like you need quality beans, of course, from a farm that works in a sustainable way and applying specialty coffee standards so you get flavors out of it, so you don't need to burn it to death to overshadow bad quality. So we do like to roast beans in a way that are enhancing the characteristics and the personalities that they have and not killing them. Like overheating milk is another example for killing something. And it needs to be done with passion, and it needs to be served well. I think that is the connection point. And in a perfect world, I would like to know and find out something about the farm that grew the crop when I receive the cup, so I can think about where this coffee came from and think about the terroir. That's for me.
Nice. George.
Yeah, well, great is defined by your taste buds, for starters. So there are those people in coffee, and I'm not one of them, who really love a very, very dark, and they look at what I drink, which is more third wave style, as being watery, thin, sour, and on, right? And they love, words that they really love are bold. That's the first word, or strong, right? I have a customer who walks in and says, I want strong coffee. I know exactly what they want, period. So great, covers a lot of territory. So what's great for me, and I suspect Ralph is along similar lines, is a lighter roast that really allows you to taste what's in the coffee bean itself, and that is not overwhelmed by the flavor of roast that can completely overwhelm and take over the flavors that you get. So it really depends what you're looking for.
That's very interesting. So a lighter roast, did you say it sort of brings in slightly sour notes?
Well, for some people. And of course, that's also the opinion that many people have is, of course, also reflected by what roaster's coffee they tried and with what water as well. Because, in one area, you can have a very flat producing water that makes it right. And then the same coffee that seems to be balanced in that area, when taken with more hard water, can suddenly taste really much brighter, right? So you get those variations. Coffee's a tricky thing. And so
I'm gaining some sense of that. Yeah.
Yes. I have to slightly change the way I brew coffee in my cafes, depending on the water that I get.
Oh, fascinating.
So, and that's for starters. Plus, a little bit what Ralph was talking about, it depends. A great coffee, regardless, in my opinion, certainly starts with location. What's the variety? How it was grown, soil, all of that. And then also by how it was processed. How were the two beans, which are really seeds, were removed from the fruit, right, to produce what kind of flavors, and then how it was shipped, because you can take a coffee that was brilliantly done at origin, destroy it on its way to you. And then, of course, it could be roasted, and the roaster is sort of a midwife, right? At least from my point of view.
Yeah.
Or the like the orchestra conductor with a score, right? Are they getting it right or not? And then finally, all of that can be still perfect and arrive at your kitchen and get destroyed in the last 5 minutes of its existence.
That's where I come in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse, what about you?
Oh man, what can I add to that? I would say, the question was, what are some of the hacks experts have to make a good cup of coffee? So I think we covered all the, there's the idea of inputs. Yeah, there's this idea of inputs and all the ways that coffee can get messed up on the way, even if it was grown perfectly and tastes great at origin and then ends up in your cup and you mess it up. But I take this in a more philosophical direction, and I think Ralph actually mentioned this, is what makes a good cup of coffee. We talked about quality sense, but what about the sourcing practices? What is that producer getting paid? Is that fair for the work that they're doing? And so you could argue, we just argued a bunch of quality points. I couldn't even add to that. I mean, Ralph and George covered all of them basically. But also I think it's important to think about, how is my coffee getting to me? Is the producer getting a fair shake of the profit? And those kinds of things also matter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's quality related.
Yeah.
But that's not, my understanding of the question was, it's how do you actually make it?
Right.
right? So there are two different points here.
Yeah. Well, if you don't pay well, then they don't have a motivation to produce.
In the long run, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And that's what Cup of Excellence was all about.
Yes.
Okay. Well, before we get deeper into the rarefied world of, very...
Let's answer the question of how does it get. The question that they're asking is, how do you brew it at home, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Several people have kind of said, how should I brew coffee at home?
So, from my point of view, it's all about extraction, right? Mm-hmm. Getting the grind correct, and getting the time. The finer the grind, the faster you're going to brew the coffee. Right. The coarser the grind, like if you have a Chemex or a French press, you're going to wait 4.5, 5 minutes typically, with a relatively coarse grind to get just the right extraction. You can over extract and you can under extract. And if you do it under, you're going to get thin, underdeveloped flavors, really not the sweetness that you want. Mm-hmm. If you over extract, you can get bitter notes. And so it's a matter of finding the right place, right? That's really critical, along with using decent water, right? That is a whole other topic.
And is that a kind of trial and error thing, or are there things you can look for when you know that your extraction is on point?
Yeah, for the typical consumer, it's really a little bit of trial and error till you get it where you want it.
Okay.
It just has to be that way. If your coffee's tasting on the bitter side, you certainly might go a little bit and strong. You might go a little bit coarser.
Okay.
A little bit more time going through it. Rolf, maybe you have a different position on that.
No, totally. I mean, I always give like a standard recipe that on the YouTube channel they blend in. So for me, this is 18 to 19 grams of coffee beans, freshly ground, medium grind setting. You take 300 milliliters of water at 94 degrees Celsius, ideally filtered water, or you have some bottled water that is not mineralized. So really a neutral water, 94 degrees. And then you pour it with even extraction in 2.5 to 3 minutes. If it's longer than 3 minutes, you're probably too slow. Then you need to go coarser. If it's too fast, like 1.5 minutes, you probably under extracting. So, and then you would taste that. I take this always as a starting point, and then you add more coffee or less, or you change your grind setting slightly. That is for me. I have 3 sisters. That's how they started.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. It's the proportion of water to coffee can ideally varies between a range of, for every gram of coffee that you're going to brew, you're going to use anywhere from 14 to 17 grams of water.
Okay.
Right? 1 to 14 or 1 to 17 ratio. And you're going to get, and believe it or not, that brew is going to be strong if it's 1.5% dissolved solids, meaning you've got 98.5% water. That's a strong cup of coffee. That's how little coffee it takes.
Interesting.
To produce a full-blown cup. Espresso, on the other hand, is more like 2 to 1.
Okay.
Right? These days, made very strong.
Okay. This is great. And I'm sort of rapidly trying to sort of conflate questions in my head. You just mentioned espressos. Jesse, Spencer says, can I make an espresso without using a machine? Is that possible?
Yeah, I thought about this question. I think the nature of espresso is that you're using a machine. The alternative is to grind up some coffee and throw it in your mouth and stick some water in your mouth. I think that there's
that's a really dangerous idea.
Right. Well, you're right. Don't do that. Don't try that at home. I think the point being that there's I think the question is more aimed at, do I need this really fancy barista level espresso machine at home to brew espresso? And my answer to that would be, from experience, like there's manual espresso brewers out there that do a fantastic job. But in order to answer this question, you really have to answer the first question, which is, what is espresso, right? And maybe that's the question we could bounce around. It's a little bit...
Yeah.
Maybe for some of us, that would be a very straightforward answer, but I think it's actually not as straightforward as it seems.
Yeah, Ralph.
I think, if you can do it on an AeroPress. You need pressure and you want to have a short drink that it's done quickly. So you just dose it like George just said, 2-to-1. Use hot water and push it through your AeroPress. It's not ideal, but I think the AeroPress is the most versatile and also the cheapest brewing instrument out there, and you can easily travel with that. So if you like a short drink that is done under pressure in a short time, I would use an AeroPress.
Okay, and that's a 2-to-1 ratio of coffee, is that right?
As like a starting point.
Yeah. There you go, Guy. Guy was asking about AirPresses.
Well, I have a, sorry, can I ask throw a question into this? So is the definition of espresso just that tight ratio? I'm kind of asking this towards Ralph and George. Do we feel like it's the tight ratio, 2-to-1, with fine ground coffee that's pressurized and pushed through a filter of some kind? Or does crema have to be there? Like, what makes the espresso an espresso? Because that's kind of the... Is that a ridiculous question? I might just be drawing this out for no reason, but
there's no such thing as a stupid question, particularly when you're talking to me.
The AeroPress is an espresso-like beverage.
Okay.
It's far from espresso.
Okay, so there we go.
Right. Yeah, there are really a lot of people, Italians in particular, like the mocha pots that you put on the stove, right? Which there's a little bit of pressure there that goes through, this coffee basket sits in the middle and comes up to the top, right? And can make a fairly strong cup of coffee that, again, is espresso-like. But I don't think any of them really achieve that kind of super thick, creamy texture that you can get with a properly made espresso. And it'll depend also if you're doing a dark roast espresso or a light roast espresso, right? The lighter the roast, the more water you're going to use typically, because otherwise you're just going to get high notes and nothing else. Yeah. Right. So you're gonna slow it down and make it more diluted. I found that if you do a really dark roast, you can actually get a delicious taste as well of a very dark chocolate, but you're making like a triple ristretto, barely any water to it.
Right.
It has to be very thick.
I think, but crema really tastes bad. I mean, we don't want the crema. That's why we put the spoon. It's not for the sugar. It's to put the crema under because it tastes so bad.
What is the crema? Is that the kind of froth at the top?
Yeah. For me, it's just an indication when extraction is finishing. But crema for me is like hairspray, but you can still have a bad haircut. So...
It's a little bit. It does prepare you. The other day I had our blend is a little bit darker than usual. I want to go that way, and the crema was gorgeous. I mean, the shades of brown and the tiger's spots on it, or stripes, everything about it made it look delicious. Yes, and then absolutely right. I moved the crema out of the way, but it sure prepared me to enjoy that, right? So
true.
It tells you how well made the espresso might be.
Yes.
Okay.
Really. It's also an indicator of freshness of the coffee.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So like if you order an espresso and there's like this much crema on it, right? You're like, okay, that was roasted like an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
But it'll get thinner. And so in my opinion, so I know Ralph isn't a fan and sounds like George is not a great fan of the crema, but I feel like the crema plays a role in the story of how you taste the espresso. Ideally it's not overwhelming and it plays the role well. Like it's there, but it's not overbearing to what's underneath.
Yes.
but you can see that's a pretty debatable topic right there.
I don't know about Ralph. To me, it's not debatable.
There's no debate here.
So crema is just disgusting.
No. Again, it's visual, and you just move the crema out of the way. It's not a problem. It's
interesting. Okay,
that is fascinating.
It's the beautiful bow tie around a present.
There you go. Yeah, you don't need the bow tie. Guy, I hope that helps you with your question. Andy sort of has a similar question to Simon. So Andy was saying, I've given up on ground coffee because it tastes quite chemically and bitter, which suggests that he's over extracting, right? From what you've told me so far.
Or a very badly roasted coffee.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. And he says, tell me why my cheap instant coffee tastes nicer. At the same time, Simon says, how do I make the best coffee from instant coffee? And I know that this is verging on heresy, I suspect, to some of you.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, all right, Jesse, jump in.
Well, Ralph was shaking his head too, but this is highly debatable. I'm going to let Ralph talk first because he's going to have more experience.
Debate, Jesse.
So for me, I want to buy more quality beans from my farmers, and I want to reach more people with quality coffee. And so especially during the pandemic, we developed specialty instant, sustainable capsule, and also drip bags that are very popular in the Middle East and Asia. And for us, we only do it if we can keep our roast style light. So we need really good extraction on those things. Most people go darker to get better extraction out of it. We don't do that. I need sustainable packaging, and I need to taste the terroir. And we are working with Swift in Washington. Unfortunately, in Europe, we haven't mastered that technique yet. And I sent them my roasted coffee, and they turn it into very pure coffee powder that only needs 80 degrees Celsius water. And I get a cup that is not on par with a long black, but is getting there. Very clean, sweet tasting coffee. Again, it's not a granulate. It's not a cheap sachet that you're buying in whatever markets you have, Walmart. But it's not cheap. We sell it for, I think, €3 per sachet. Mm-hmm. So it has the same pricing here as a long black, but you can take it anywhere. So you're in a business meeting, you have it in your pocket. You just ask for tea water. I'm traveling a lot, so I only ask for hot water on the plane. That's usually for free instead of paying €5 for a Costa coffee that is like really awful. I can have my barn instant and it tastes clean. And I get we say Frankfurter Gruß, we get my coffee in shot into my bloodstream, and it's from a farm that I work with.
Sure.
Yeah.
George, is instant coffee heresy?
Well, I haven't tried all of them. There are a lot of new, as they call it, third wave, third wave instant coffees that are clearly far better than what we normally associate with instant coffee, no doubt. There is another way. I too share Ralph's desire to get to something that is very easy to brew at home, to make. Until that day arrives, really, consumers have to be somewhat craft oriented to get a great cup of coffee, right? End of story. And that harms the farmers a lot, right? Because few consumers are able to get the kind of mind-boggling tastes that people like Rolf and I get with some regularity, right? And that's really an issue. Here, where I am in Boston, there is a company that I'm working with, Cometeer, which has taken a different tack, and that is they are brewing coffee correctly and instantly freezing it. And they are brewing actually an extract, a very powerful extract.
Same.
Right. So in this particular case, it's a capsule that's made out of recycled aluminum that can be recycled again. And in that is a frozen amount of this extract coffee. and you simply need to drop that in your cup, add hot water, and it's very much the same at a lower temperature than you would brew coffee at. In Fahrenheit, it would be like 185, 180 degrees, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the 200 plus. And it melts on the spot, and you've got your coffee. And that has been pretty extraordinary. You really do get a lot of nuance out of that, right? So still just starting, right? A number of roasters are going through Cometeer, which brews these coffees. So that's, as I say, that's sort of the pioneer stage right now, but very exciting for us.
Fascinating. Jesse, you're I feel like you're a real, you should be a diplomat or something. You're very...
I like to talk about coffee. That's really it.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
And we got, we got great people with lots of experience here. I mean, George and Ralph both. I think what we're talking about here is a really interesting evolution in coffee, which is this evolution of ready to drink coffee, specialty coffee. You think of instant as it's not technically ready to drink because you don't just, eat it or drink it, but you have to do a little bit of something. But we're reducing the distance between that customer and the quality that we hope they experience in their final cup without the customer having the opportunity to really mess it up. I mean, unless they're putting in really disgusting water into their, instant coffee thing. But per the question, was it Jake or the person asking about the
Andy? Yeah. And
okay, yeah. There are a few things you want to look into. Why it probably has something to do with your coffee. The quality of the coffee, either that you're buying, it could have to do with your grind being totally out of whack. There are a lot of things I would just take a moment to look at each point where that coffee could have gotten messed up. Start with the bean. Does the bean actually taste good? Like actually take a bean, a whole one if you can, stick it in your mouth and bite down on it and say, does this taste disgusting? Because if it does, it's not going to make good coffee, right? And if it tastes okay, or if it tastes, ooh, that's kind of nice, then you're starting right. And then work down the line. What's my water taste like? Is my grind setting all wackadoodle? Is there really big chunks of coffee in my grind or really tiny ones? Or is it kind of even looking across the board? There's a lot of places that could have messed up. So
what's the color of the roast?
What's the color? Yeah,
right. If it's on the black side, you bet it's going to be bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to learn because I honestly didn't know that. It's almost like as personal a preference as how you like your toast. Some people like a very lightly toasted piece of bread, and some people like carbon.
That's exactly right.
That's really interesting. Now we've touched on this. Tamara says, hijacking panel, I would love to know about water temperature, please, and the best water to use. Now, Ralph, you were talking about 80 degrees and 94 point. It sounded like radio stations. Tell me about water.
So for me, if you, water can really mess up your head. If I remember when the first osmosis were put in coffee shops, like everybody was looking at the water and then they freaked when like one of the parameters was out of line. But I feel at home, if you don't have like a carbon filter or anything, a good way to start is bottled water, a neutral water that has no added minerals or anything like that. In Germany, we have Volvic, for instance. In America, I don't know. And then the water temperature for me, off boil is a good starting point. Usually when I start pouring my V60 or AeroPresses, they are around 92 to 94 Celsius. But you can go lower and play with the grind setting and do long extractions, a little bit cooler. It's really creative, and that makes it really so attractive to be geeky at home and find your own way of how you want to approach the bean, I feel.
I've seen people talking about like cold brew stuff. Is that a thing or is that a gimmick? George?
Yeah. You hit a sore spot.
Oh, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Do it. Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, temperature. I don't know if your audience talks in centigrade or in Fahrenheit.
We tend to go for Celsius, yeah.
Okay, so that's fine. Yeah, so I agree with Rob on pretty much the temperature and such. And I do agree with clear, if you can get spring water, that kind of thing, very clean tasting water or whatever, and you're likely to get much better results with that. You can you can get distilled water as well. And then there are these third wave now additives of typically magnesium and calcium that are done in the right proportion, right, that tend to bring out the sweetness and the terroir notes of a coffee as well. So it just depends how far you want to go with enhancing or bringing out the most. Regarding cold brew, that's not genuine iced coffee.
Right.
And I think there are two issues here. The issue that really burns me is what I call the absolute false advertising of declaring that iced coffee done in any other way is too acidic.
Okay.
As this negative thing, as if acidity were something that you should not want in your coffee to begin with.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not in Europe. I don't know if that's the case there, but in the States, you're seeing that all over the place. Right.
Well, here, cold brew is not such a big thing because it tastes really boring. It's always the same because if you have a long cold extraction, you can't extract. So it's all the same. And so it doesn't really matter what terroir you have. I find it's all like boring. The only way to make it taste good is adding nitro. So it tastes like a Guinness beer and I feel like I'm in Ireland. So that's really good. But I feel acidity is really, really cool. If we can touch on acidity for a moment. So I think acidity needs to be defined as a fruit flavor that is holding together and giving the coffee structure. And it's a very positive thing. And because the acidity that comes from the bean comes and goes, and the sourness that people are mixing up with acidity comes from bad beans or bad roast, and it's probably also not so good for your stomach, and you get a heartburn. So acidity is something we should celebrate, and we do here in Germany at least, and wherever I sell my coffees, I don't burn out acidity. I think it's beautiful. If someone doesn't like acidity, they need to pick a bean or an origin that is lower in acidity and higher in sweetness.
It's exactly right. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Rolf has been saying. That is the issue. Imagine a strawberry without any acidity. That's ridiculous. If you taste a strawberry and it's all acidity, it's because it's not ripe.
Right.
If the strawberry is fully ripe, it will have lots of acidity, but the sweetness balances it and makes it highly pleasurable. As it becomes more overripe, it becomes mushy, and that brilliant sweetness goes away as well, and loses definitions, structure, as Rolf was saying. So I couldn't agree more. And how acidity could be bad when every single drink people have is often
I was going to
more
say,
acidic
any
than
soft
coffee.
drink is filled with citric acid.
Exactly right. So it has nothing to do with acidity. The problem, I think, lied with the difficulty in producing genuine iced coffee, right? I believe that if you start, so many people were giving me iced coffee where they're under extracting the coffee, because the problem is if you do a regular cup of coffee that's perfect and then you add ice cubes, it dilutes very quickly. And so you get a watery drink. So you end up using too little water to too much coffee and not extracting everything, right? And then you add the ice. So this is the problem. So then you get an unextracted and you don't get it balanced right. The simplest way to deal with that, by the way, is, I presume they're available in Europe, are stainless steel ice cubes that are used to chill alcoholic drinks.
Okay.
So you brew that, you get your set of ice cubes, throw it in, and bingo, within literally a minute, the temperature of the coffee goes way down to iced coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
If they're stainless steel, don't throw them in too hard.
There's another method too. In Texas, I would argue, have borderline mastered the iced coffee world. There's some really good iced coffee methods. One that got popular out here was it's called like a Japanese flash brew method, where you adjust so say you were going to brew hot coffee, but you're like, nah, today I want iced coffee. So what you do is you adjust for the ice. So you count the same amount of water, but you use some water, and then you adjust for your ice as water. So it's just frozen water, right? Mm-hmm. And then you brew over that ice as you brew. So it's like a hand brew, and this becomes like a Japanese flash ice brew method. At least that's what we call it over here.
You still have the issue of way too much coffee and nowhere near enough water that is extracting.
If you adjust for the ice, so if let's just use
bottom, though, that's being received.
Needs to come from the top.
Oh, are you saying brew? Okay, I got a recipe I'll have to send you. Yeah, let's see what you think about it.
Full hot water over the full amount of time to get the right brew.
Yeah, we do the same that you do in Texas. That's our method, but we try to use as little ice as possible because the dilution effect that George is describing is there.
Try the ice cubes. They're fabulous. They really work. There is a machine now that we're using at home, not at home, but in our cafes, which is sort of like an air conditioning machine. And you just pour the hot brewed coffee through this tube that literally is cooled. This process is now being used. A company is called Snap Chill here, and it's canned, and it's genuine iced coffee, and it's phenomenal.
Nice.
So that you may start to see that in Europe as well, and that's something worth looking at, Ralph, in terms of simplicity and results.
Let's go to Jane's question. So she's a good person to be leading gently by the hand into this, kind of like me. She says, I'm pretty new to coffee. Hi, Jane. I hear you. I see you. And I pretty much exclusively drink iced lattes. Does anyone have any advice for going to the next level of coffee? I don't think I'm ready for espresso yet, but I'd like to try other things. Thank you.
Oh, I think I know what Ralph is going to say.
Go on. You write it down and put it in a sealed envelope, George. We'll listen to what Ralph's going to say.
No, it has to be an iced V60. It needs to be a hand brew pour over. It's the highest quality you can get. You experience terroir. It's hand brewed. You can watch the ceremony 2-3 minutes when you order it on our bar. You connect with the barista at the same time, talk about the farm over ice, and it really drinks. I think there's a risk here that you drink too fast when it's iced, and you want another one, and then you're completely high on coffee.
What is a V60?
That's like your Melita classic pour over, your drip coffee, as my grandmother had it. And we're actually brewing like my grandmother brewed it, only that we are using an enhanced version of it with a bigger hole at the bottom and, in a V shape with a 60-degree angle. So that's the V60 from Hario. And, that extracts really, really well, 2 to 3 minutes, like I said. And for me, that's what I do in the mornings, Yeah. And my grandmother knew that the first 30 seconds, we have a pre-infusion, like we also do sometimes in espresso machines. We are wetting the water to create a blooming, sometimes we say, when the coffee is fresh, and it creates this little atomic mushroom. And that time is needed for the coffee to kind of get ready for extraction. And that my grandmother always wetted, walked away, came back, and then started pouring. So I think we are using things that everybody knew before we commercialized and strangled coffee and came up with frappuccinos.
George. You know about George's history, right?
Well, frappuccinos are worse than cafe latte. They both require minimal quality coffee.
Right.
Just okay. You're not going to use a very expensive or great coffee to do a latte with. Really, right. Because you're just wasting your money. So, and was the question about iced latte or latte? I got lost on that.
Iced lattes.
It was iced latte. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, George, where would you not to frappuccinos? Where would you take Jane next on her coffee adventure?
Get rid of the milk. Simple.
Right.
Get rid of the milk and discover what coffee can really do. The rainbow of flavors that coffee is capable of giving you. Make it, and I mean, it's got more complexity than any wine in terms of all the components that go into it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely extraordinary. I think the vast majority of people have no idea how sweet coffee can be. I can't tell you how many times I've had people taste a black coffee because I would say, sorry, you're at my place and you can't. I don't have sugar and I don't have any milk, so I can offer it black. And they try it and they go, did you add sugar to this? I mean,
interesting.
People are blown away by that. They don't expect it anymore.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with a consumer who has found their comfort level, because specialty's been around now for a long time.
Yeah.
There tends to be less curiosity, except for younger people looking for it.
Yeah. I absolutely
I would also,
I want to come back to that. Yes.
I would also say that, the larger brewers that we have will make a better pot of coffee than the V6 or any of the smaller methods.
Right.
One, because it's consistent, and two, because of the filter tops, the extraction is much more even. But I have found the coffee to be delicious that way and very hard to produce consistently in smaller quantities.
Yeah.
I use at home with my wife. We use an automatic machine, Bonavita, which has a shower head on top. It does allow for a waiting period, and then continues with the right temperature and so on. So it's a shower going over the flatbed of coffee grounds. And and because every morning I'm tasting a different coffee that we've roasted, right? It is my quality control on top of cupping and all the rest of it, which allows me not to worry about did I brew it the same way as I did yesterday. Everything is very much identical, and the quality is really high. So it allows me to really get into the nuances and drink that coffee. And this person's missing with the latte. I can drink it over 20 to 30 minutes, and I am getting a changing beverage because it's different when it's hot, it's different when it's medium temperature, and it's still different when it's getting to room temperature, like the best glass of wine.
It's a journey. Yeah, it's a journey.
It opens.
Yeah.
And I think that is what people who are putting all their milk in the coffee don't know about for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very strong vegan message. Jesse, where would you take Jane next?
Oh, where would I take Jane? Oh, okay. I think the other route she could take, or Jane could take, would be, to just slowly reduce the amount of milk. That's not going to have the same effect as just removing the milk entirely, but it's a step, I think, in the right direction. So I would say if you're starting at an iced latte level, you could just start to ask for, hey, just like half the amount of milk and just see how that goes. Now, that's not, in my opinion, that's not the same as just trying a really great cup of iced black coffee, because I think that is probably the most compelling way to do this. But that's another route that Jane could take. Just start slowly reducing the amount that you're tasting.
My problem is there's absolutely no revelation in that method.
Yeah.
Right,
because it's too slow. It's not all at once.
Yes.
That's a great point.
I see what you're saying there. There you go, Jane. Some things for you to try. Now, Alina says, what country has the best coffee? That's obviously, I guess, in the eye of the beholder. And I before we sort of fall into that trap, and potentially international conflict. George, you were sort of saying that this is kind of following on from what Jane was saying. You were saying, try maybe a lighter roast and stuff. And I'm interested to know not just what country has the best coffee, but actually, if you have a developing taste for coffee, what kind of roast, what kind of bean, what kind of character should you be looking for as you kind of deepen your understanding of it?
Yeah, that's, I would definitely say lighter roast, not too light, because too light will be too much acidity and not enough body, but distinctly a light roast, one that is roasted just past what we call the first crack. When you're roasting coffee, it starts to pop, much like popcorn at a certain point, right? Releasing moisture or vapor out as it does so. And just a little bit after that, you stop the roast, right? And that's typically a light roast.
And am I right in understanding coffee beans go exothermic at some point with the roasting, don't they? Where they actually, even if you turn the heat off, they still keep going hotter and hotter.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So that's the
midwife bit.
That's right.
That's the craft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were we with this?
So you're thinking about what kind of beans?
Yeah. So, and then the way I take people is I'll take them to like middle C on the piano or something like that. So I'll orient them towards a Central American typically and say that's a coffee typically.
Okay.
And it's interesting how many people go, wow, that's what I want. I want a coffee, right? And then you can say, well, maybe from that, you would like something a little bit fruitier. And then you can recommend a Brazil natural as being very fruity, typically. Or a Kenya or an Ethiopian, which are washed, which are more delicate, but in my opinion, have more subtle, nuanced notes that are truly extraordinary, more perfumed, if you will. You can lead them in it depends who that person is and what they're looking for, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I ask them, do you drink natural wine or red wine or white wine? It gives you an idea for their palate.
Perfect.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Exactly right. You ask, how do they brew the coffee? How do they exactly? What are their preferences in other things that they drink? Absolutely right.
Yeah,
that's such a good way of.
But I agree with George. It's a learning curve, and we need to lower the barrier for understanding. We can't shock people with something they completely misunderstand. Someone said to me once, if you have a castle and you have your relatives coming for a visit, you need to get them through the door, and then you show them the mirror room a little bit later.
I like it.
Yeah. And Ralph, how would you? What do you agree with what George said? Is there anything you'd add to that?
Not really. And I love all my daughters. They should all marry. I love all my coffees from different countries and different expression. Right. And so we all have this. In Germany, we say the aha effect, the aha coffee, the coffee that you always remember, the first coffee that really was an eye opener. And that in my case was a Kenyan coffee from Tim Wendelbo called Tekangu. And I still remember this tomato rhubarb soup on my tongue when I think back. And so I have a soft spot for Kenya since then.
Yeah, I have similar memories. Different person's coffee, but similar memories. It depends. It's a bit like choosing what's the most beautiful flower. It really depends on the occasion.
Gotcha.
The time, the occasion, all of these things, and also how perfect that particular coffee was from origin, how perfectly roasted it. All those things add up. So, I can say, wow, that Kenya was the best coffee I've ever had in my life. And the next day walk in and have a Guatemalan that floors me. So much for that first opinion. Jesse,
what about you?
Oh, I don't think I can add much to this. Yeah, I think everything that's been said here is excellent. I think that there's a whole world out there, and people just still don't know it. I would say if you can explore the specialty coffee world, look for high quality coffees, and just try some out. And ideally try them out in the context where the expertise first starts at the cafe, if you can. So you kind of get an idea for how do you properly brew this? How should it taste? Because the risk you take when you just buy a really high quality coffee and you have it shipped to your house is you stick it in like a helicopter grinder thing, and then then you put too much water and you're like, this is no better than anything else I was drinking. So kind of let the barista play the role that they're there to play, which is to brew you an excellent cup of coffee and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and try more than one place.
Yes, yeah.
Because any barista can blow it.
Yeah,
that's true.
Can I add something that's really close to my heart? I know that George is much longer in the business than I am, but I've been building and fighting for farm work, for close relationships, for the sourcing just as much, and I find that over the past few years we have this huge wave of commercialization of specialty coffee. I travel a lot. I'm in Asia. I see beautiful coffee shops with beautiful people that look like they work for Disneyland, with nice hats and amazing packages, and they all say the same thing. It's so difficult. I wish we could invent a new word for what the truthful approach in specialty coffee should be. And I think it starts at the source in a meaningful way, and not just saying, I'm working with these farms for the last 6 years when I just purchased from a trader for the past 6 years. But actually to go there and have an impact, and then you automatically pay more and you build a committed relationship. And I feel when you go to a specialty coffee shop or you are warming up with a new roaster, find out if people are really working at source and how much are they paying for their coffees, because a lot of that is branding for me.
Yeah, gotcha. I certainly do agree. Roasters, that was what Cup of Excellence was all about back in 1999 when it first started, was making roasters come to the country of origin. That's what happened for the first time, really. Most roasters were simply never going. We all bought coffee directly through various importers where we were. And you didn't have to go anywhere. And if you went there like a tourist, basically, and left. That was the end of it. But that sent people really traveling then to meet and develop relationships with different farms. The thing that's interesting is, so prices really went up for a lot of farmers who would win Cup of Excellence, right? And form relationships with buyers from Europe, from America, Asia, and so on around the world. But then prices tend to freeze, interestingly enough, over many years. While fertilizer prices and everything else go up, the price stays more or less the same, albeit much higher than the commodity price. Right. But, there is, so what I'm trying to do with very few relationships, but just a few, because we're not large enough. The larger you are, the more relationships you can entertain and do them properly, right? But is to be paying them, well over $10 a pound or more. But to do that requires often getting around the commodity way we ship coffee in boats. Over long periods of time, where they lose a tremendous amount of their freshness. How do you deal with coffee that's in front of people that only lasts a few months because it ages on you? The green coffee ages on you. That's why I freeze the coffee that we have, the green, right? Because I want to keep particular coffees in front of and available to people at their top quality year round, like a wine, because that promotes that farmer.
That kind of brings us to a useful question from Kat, who says, my nan swears by keeping her coffee in the freezer in an air-sealed lunchbox. Yeah. Is this another thing I can add to her quirky personality? Or is there method to her madness? I'd also like to know what's the best way to store coffee. Jesse, how do you store yours?
No. This is a George question. I would love to. I feel like, George, you kind of, didn't you pioneer the frozen coffee thing?
Yeah,
I feel like
he did.
Frozen green.
Yeah, I am not going to touch this question. I'll let George do that.
Okay. No, in our cafes, the minute we open up, if it stays in the one-way valve bag, right, that's air sealed, it's okay for quite a few weeks, right? Okay. But the moment you're opening that, you're exposing oxygen and the whole process starts, right? So somebody will order a particular coffee, a single brew. So we open the bag, you brew it from there. But now the next time we brew that coffee, it's been frozen in a container just that size for one brew, and it's frozen on the spot. And I've been doing that for the last 20 years. Right. But I can't tell you how many third wave roasters had videos saying you never should freeze roasted coffee.
Yeah.
Which was insane. It's like they never tried what they were saying. They couldn't have.
Yeah.
What's missing, what happens even in one day, if I take a coffee that I've opened on Monday and I drink it a second time on Tuesday, it will have lost dimension. There's no other word for it. It has some of the sweetness, it has some of the notes. It's the dimension, like an aura around it, that's missing. That's the first thing that starts to go away, and it gets progressively worse as it ages further. Right?
So, Ralph and Jesse, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's an impact on how many fridges can you have and what's your carbon footprint. Let's not get into that because it's a technical question.
Well, it's not big. Let me assure you, it's a little freezer. Even with the quantity we do.
Yeah. But I think what we don't want consumers to do is put it in the fridge and take it in and out, in and out, in and out. I think that really we don't like. We like room temperature at home in a sealed bag, no daylight, no oxygen. Yeah.
No, I don't agree with that. I say freeze it. If you're fanatic, put them in different containers or whatever. But it's very easy to take a coffee out of the freezer, pour a little bit in the amount that you have. It takes seconds. Put it back in. Nothing's going to happen. It stays quite well frozen. And the colder the coffee, the better the coffee gets ground, the more evenly it gets ground, as proven by world champion baristas.
Yes.
Who used very frozen coffee and, won that championship.
Jesse, I can see why you were reluctant to wade into this one.
Yeah, you think I was going to answer that question? I'd be like, well, I don't freeze my coffee. While my baby's screaming, I try to brew it as quickly as possible. So
try it. People should try it.
I'm going to start doing it, George. I'm doing it this week. I promise you.
Kat, your nan was right. Maybe she was right about everything, and maybe you've got a lot of reappraising to do now.
You will find that I believe the way because the grind is more even, the colder the coffee, it will make a slightly stronger brew.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting. Now, we slightly touched on this, and I was interested. Tom says, and I'm conscious of the time, but Tom says, do your guests have the ultimate French press technique? Now, Ralph, you were talking about kind of wetting the coffee first and letting it kind of bloom a bit. Now, with my cafetiere, I've started doing a thing where I pour a bit of water into the grounds, just enough to kind of wet them, and I kind of whoosh it around, and all of this kind of vapor comes off. And then I'll kind of pour more water in. But tell me how I should do it in a cafetiere or a French press.
Yeah, I have to admit I don't have much experience with a French press, to be honest. But we know that also, agitation is a part that plays a role in extraction, not only the water temperature and the water and the grind setting, but also, and I guess in a French press, you would also move around the coffee. And I guess George wouldn't agree that to be a very consistent method that can be replicated. I think French presses an easy way, when you're in a hotel room or something, that you do, but it's very, is it the fair word to say it's spontaneous more?
Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky. I've really been thinking a lot about the French press. It's not something like Ralph. I don't use the French press anymore. Back in the 70s to the early 80s, that's how I drank coffee. And the Coffee Connection served every coffee we had. We made single pots of French press coffee for people to prove that they tasted different. The way I look at it, then more recently, I went to a really high quality restaurant in Cambridge, and they were not serving me espresso, which is 90% of the time dreadful in restaurants, no matter how expensive they are.
Yep, that's very true.
Instead, they were serving French press. Now, that's very interesting. It's at night. I've had a full meal, very rich and so on. Maybe I've had some dessert. My taste buds are more tired. The French press with a very slightly darker, light medium roast really comes out great, and it comes through. So to me, number one, it depends if you like a medium roast. French press may be much more valuable to you than a light roast. A light roast, I don't think works very well. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you do a light roast then?
I wouldn't. I need to experiment more on that because, like Ralph, I haven't really spent a lot of time. I had it at that restaurant, and I realized this is what restaurants should do, rather than the $12,000 espresso machine that a waiter or a waitress does, then quits next week, and you have somebody else who has no clue what they're doing, right? Or they give up and they get an espresso.
Yes, that's probably most consistent. Yeah,
exactly. Which is, mediocrity at its best.
Perfect. Jesse, do you have any tips for a French press?
You know what I discovered about the French press is if you have a coffee that is aged out, so you've had it for too long and you didn't freeze it like you should have.
Yeah.
Actually, the French press I found does the best job at recovering that coffee. Out of all the other brew methods I've tried. So if you have a coffee that's kind of aged out, you feel like it's flat, it's not very dynamic, I'd say stick it in the French press. I mean, you could even torture it a little bit with some agitation, which is just, kind of like Ralph said, or sorry, I guess you brought it up, the idea of pouring up in the beginning and mixing it around. You can work with a French press in that sense to save a coffee that you might otherwise throw in the...
Yeah. French press is like a demi-tasse. It's not like a drip. It's much stronger. Yeah. It should be made stronger, more intense. So that's the other issue. It's that way. It's more like the AeroPress.
Gotcha. Okay, super fast. Kim says, I'd love to hear about Turkish coffee. I recently ate at a Turkish cafe and I ordered a Turkish coffee. It was so yummy. I would love to make it at home. I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but is it the same process as making coffee from a ground coffee? I don't even know what Turkish coffee is. So, Jesse.
Well, it's brewed in something I'm going to pronounce wrong. It's the Ibrik or the Ibrik, which is a traditional brewing device.
Or
that's about
a knackered iPhone. Is that right?
A what? yeah, that's right. Or that's funny. Now, this is what I've been told by people who have brewed specialty Turkish coffee, is that it can be delicious. I've not had good experiences with Turkish coffee, but I don't know why. So I've been told there's great ways to brew it. I'm not the person to tell you the recipes, but there's definitely resources out there for specialty coffee. Turkish coffee brewing methods. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Okay. Ralph?
I mean, we have, I'm not doing it. I do enjoy Turkish coffee when I'm in Turkey, or a mocha when I'm in Greece. And when I take it home, it's usually because it's to do also with the visit and the atmosphere on the street in Istanbul. But we have Ibrik championships, and I would recommend to go to the website and look at the recipes of the finalists of the World Championships.
Yeah, I second that motion. And in fact, I wrote down there's the 2013 world champion Turkish coffee person has a website. and it's specialtyturkishcoffee.com.
There you go.
You might look at that. It's got the equipment. It talks about how to brew it and so on, and would do a much better job than I could about how to brew it properly.
Amazing.
And I guess, Raf, you being younger, you probably went there much after I did. I was in Istanbul back around in the 90s, right? So somewhere around 2000 or something like that, right? And back then they were into Rio coffee, right? RIO for Rio de Janeiro, which is a defect in the coffee that produces a very medicinal burned rubber note. Like iodine, basically. Very similar to iodine.
Exquisite.
Reject.
That's what I was getting. No milk, no amount of sugar, nothing could get rid of that. It was the first time I stopped drinking.
Wow.
But I'm sure that now with the competitions and so on, the world champion and all the rest of that has changed dramatically. Right?
Yeah.
But I know how the Brazilians told me they loved at that time the Middle East, which was buying their worst coffee at premium prices. A taste for it, right?
Nice. I mean, not. Final question, and I feel like I know what your answer is going to be. Ruben says, what's the panel's take on caramel double shot syrup, pumpkin spice, and mocha coffees? I mean, do I need to ask?
Yes.
Okay.
I go to Starbucks because I'm sugar addict, but yes. I would never do it in my shop. So I think it's, that Starbucks is a milkshake company and they're really good at producing sugary drinks. That's why everybody goes. And they burn it to death. So you walk around longer with a branded cup. We all know that. Okay. But it is a sugar addiction that drives me to that drink when I'm on a holiday. But it's nothing to do with everything that's been said in this session.
Okay.
I love your transparency there, Ralph. That was really transparent. I
like that you owned up to that. Nice. Well, on that note, which we'll definitely run by our lawyers. Thank you all so much for lending your expertise to our podcast. I really, really, really appreciate it. Where can people find you and more about the coffee you consume and produce? Jesse, where are you? And your poetry, indeed.
Oh, my poetry. No, that's not public accessible right now.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. But if you're listening here, you're already a podcast listener. Just go search The Coffee Podcast. And we have some content out coming soon, actually. And George is, funny enough, going to be on the show. So, just you can hear us chat about some American coffee history. So
perfect. And Ralph, what about you?
So the best is my website is thebarn.de. You can see everything. You can go to my Instagram that I'm personally writing. It's my diary. I don't have any influencers typing up hello, happy Monday posts. Everything is authentic and with opinion. So that's probably the best way to follow me.
Fantastic. And George?
Yeah, GeorgeHowellCoffee.com is the website. Very simple. If you come to Boston, please visit our cafe in downtown, where, hopefully you will, if you haven't already, you will taste just how good it can be.
And then we must leave it. I'm off for a half-calf caramel banana macchiato supreme deluxe with a hard-boiled egg. I'm kidding, I'm vegan. Everything else still stands though. That's it for the podcast for this time. Hope you enjoyed it. Hey, don't forget to drop us a line. It's podcast@veganlifemag.com. Love to hear from you. Really love to hear from you. What you been eating there? And we'll be back with more. Don't forget Vegan Life Live. That's happening. It's the 11th and 12th of June. I've sort of thrown out assorted dates, I think, on this podcast. I'm pretty sure it's the 11th and 12th. of June. In any case, I'm going to be there. And it'd be lovely if you want to come say hi. We're going to be doing a couple of sessions, but there's some amazing other speakers and lots of great stuff going on. Why don't you go check that out? veganlifemag.com. I suspect has all the details. Of course I've checked. I'm a team player, guys. Also, I work very well by myself and frequently have to. That's it from me, Jake Yap. I'm on Instagram too, by the way. It's at Jake Yap, or it's veganlife_podcast for all of that. All right, shut up now, Jake. All right, bye.